So I'm particularly excited to introduce my dear friend and colleague from Michigan, Dr. Arash Javanbakht. And he is an associate professor at Wayne State University. He's a psychiatrist and neuroscientist, and he is nationally known for clinical and research work on anxiety, trauma, and PTSD. Within this area, he really has two lines of work. So one line looks at risk and resilience among refugee children and adults. So this work is currently funded by an R01, where he examines the epigenetic, autonomic, parenting, and environmental elements of trauma impact. And his lab also uses art, dance, yoga, mindfulness in helping refugee families overcome stress. The second line of work within this area is the use of AI and augmented reality for the treatment of anxiety disorders and PTSD, and that's the focus of the presentation today. So he already offered that he can come back for another second talk to talk about his first line of research. We might take you up on that, Arash. So he received numerous awards, including the ADIA Distinguished Member Award and the Society of Biological Psychiatry Humanitarian Award. He has been featured on numerous media outlets, including CNN, NPR, and the Washington Post. And he's also the author of the book, Afraid, Understanding the Purpose of Fear and Harnessing the Power of Anxiety. So please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Javanbakht today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be invited specifically by you, Dr. Meyer. We grew up together in the same lab, and
We did, yeah.
I learned a lot, both in science and in manner from you. So I'm going to start sharing my slides. And so, I am a psychiatrist, and I was trained in trauma, and all I do is trauma and stress-related work. In my clinic, I work with survivors of torture, human trafficking, refugees, first responders, civilians, all sorts of people who have had, mostly civilians with severe trauma exposure and chronic stress. And in research, as it was mentioned earlier by Dr. Meyer, we look at anything that trauma does to the brain and the body. In refugee children, we have longitudinal studies with refugee children, with Syrians and Iraqis. We were this close to get an NIH funding to do the same work in Ukraine, but now, with the new government policies, that's impossible. And we also have a statewide program for working with another highly trauma-exposed population, which is first responders. We have a state-funded project working with cops, firefighters, dispatchers, EMTs across the state of Michigan. I'm also very much involved in public education via different media outlets. And that book is part of those endeavors. So part of our work is trying to make our treatments more efficient, more accessible, and better, and filling in the gaps that current treatments don't have. The work I'm presenting today is in that line. So these are where we have been funded, and the work I'm sharing is patented. So I'm just repeating what you already know, so I will go fast through these. That anxiety and trauma-related conditions are very common. And these conditions are treatable. A lot of times when I talk to my students and residents, I say, I love the field of anxiety and trauma because we have good treatments and treatment works. But most patients do not have access to treatment and don't have access to experts who provide those sorts of treatments. Majority of people, let's say, who are expert in treatment of PTSD are around academic environments and not in the remote areas. And then we have groups, including the ones that I work, which have a unique exposure to trauma, which is cumulative, more than the average populations. One is the urban residents, where I work in Detroit, and then the military population. When we talk PTSD, historically, always the conversation was about combat veterans, but then gradually we opened our eyes in other populations. First responders, high rates of suicide. Actually, more cops die to suicide than in line of duty. And PTSD prevalence is very high in first responders because so for veterans, they go to the combat, they get the trauma, then they come back to the safety of the environment of the homeland. But for first responders, I didn't know a lot of it before I started working with them. They have to go have dinner in the same restaurant they had a failed CPR on a baby. And the exposure is chronic. Basically, every day a cop, firefighter, EMT goes to work, they may see some horrible incidents, or they may be shot at or endanger themselves. So the direct and indirect exposure to trauma is very high. And refugees, our own research with Syrian and Iraqi refugees, 2 years later in Michigan shows about 30% passing the full diagnostic threshold for PTSD. We did talk about first responders, and of course, trauma impact. I mean, anytime we say trauma, we think PTSD, but there are so many different pathways trauma can impact someone. And we all know that DSM says PTSD when somebody passes the diagnostic threshold, but in reality, I always say God didn't create a disease called PTSD. So from 0 to 100% of impact of trauma when somebody is exposed, people can develop different levels of symptoms, and at some percent, let's say 70%, DSM draws a line and says whoever is above this line, we call them PTSD. A lot of people at 69 or 65 with some stress can move above that threshold line. So there are a lot of people sub-threshold with other symptoms or less symptoms who are still suffering specifically with avoidances related to their trauma. This I will mention a little bit later. So one of the best treatments we have for conditions like PTSD and phobias is exposure therapy. It's a treatment that works very well. And we know that patients come to the clinic and say, I know it's stupid, but I'm afraid of spiders, which means the logical brain knows the spider is safe, but it's the animal brain, the associative brain, that doesn't know, doesn't get it. And that associative brain learns through experience. Extinction learning works. We gradually expose the person to what they're afraid of, and the fear goes away. And it's a good treatment. And that's how I work in my own fear of heights, actually, in New York State of California, flying in a fighter jet. If you didn't know, you can do that. But the challenges we have with exposure, traditional exposure therapy, are multiple. The main one is that we do not have the objects for treatment. Let's say if someone comes to my office and says, I'm afraid of spiders or dogs, I don't have a dog or a spider or a snake or a group of people for those with social anxiety in my clinic. So we cannot deliver those effective treatments because of lack of possibilities. Well, some people are dedicated enough, they go home and they bring their own dog to the clinic. That dog may get excited, the dog doesn't listen to you, you cannot do the gradual exposure. A lot of patients, when they know there's a real dog in the building, they don't even enter the building. And then you cannot generalize the treatment impact because, yeah, your patient may feel comfortable with your Labrador or Golden Retriever, but then they go to the neighborhood and see the bulldog and the fear comes back. So we cannot generalize the treatment response. Or if you have even in the experiment, you want to do a social stress test, you have to go ask for this and that colleague to come and sit there. And each time there are different people, you cannot have a coherent basically setup, and you don't have all the ages and races and appearances and behaviors. So it's becomes very limited. As a result, a lot of times we do what I call it, hey, what's up therapy. The patient comes and say, hey, how was your week? And we talk about it. And 3 years later, we're still talking about how my week was, and my fear of people is still there. Sometimes we have to go out with our patients to the grocery store. Some people try to even have the patient on the phone or on some camera or on these video conferencing. Still, it has its own challenges. People have tried to address this with virtual reality. Basically, you wear these goggles, you see some virtual spiders around you, and most of the use has been focused around the combat veterans with PTSD, where you wear the goggles, they replicate the prolonged exposure context. Interestingly, I was talking to one of our colleagues in Florida today. She works with first responders, and they use VR, and she said, well, honestly, we have VR because it sounds cool. Otherwise, imaginal exposure does better when you have to go to the memory of exact experience you had. Because I can recall my memory much better than what that standard, generic, let's say, VR Iraq or Afghanistan that is. The other thing is that the VR brings us to a totally unnatural and virtual environment as well. So my exposure is in a virtual context. And Stephanie and I grew up in a lab where every day we were told extinction learning is context dependent. So what happens in one context may not apply to other contexts. That's a challenge with the VR. And then you're sitting there and using joysticks to move around and navigate across this environment. That's why when I learned about augmented reality, actually a couple of days ago, our work was featured on The Scientist, and they mentioned how it all started. I saw a TED Talk by basically CEO of one of these AR startups about 10, 12 years ago, who was a neuroscientist. And I was like, wow, this is such an amazing technology. Anytime I want to talk about AR, I show this image. This is Iron Man, Tony Stark, because this is AR. To just distinguish between AR and VR, augmented reality mixes the real and the unreal. That's how AR works. And VR takes you to a totally different world. So with the AR, you can see the real world. I see the people around me, and then I see the virtual objects superimposed in that environment, which makes it a lot more immersive in my experience. And I thought that that is amazing, because then you can contextualize fear learning to in the real world context. And the patient can walk around, they see their own hands, they see their own body, they see their therapist. It feels a lot more real and more connected, and you can walk and interact with the objects around you. So I explained about what VR is, AR is, and there's this this headset that you're seeing. One of my colleagues, Shantan, who's wearing. These are products of Microsoft, and the field is moving so fast that this is going extinct before even having met the public. It has been used by like a big industries, and it never made it to the realm of the public awareness much. So when you have AR, you can bring any kind of dog or any kind of spider or any kind of human you want. You can do in vivo contextualization in the real world. The patient can walk around and have their own sense of control. They have visual access to their therapists. And you can have all these different objects in the same platform, because you don't have to create the whole world. You just create those objects and put them. So you can bring all the good components of a successful therapy together. That's why I got very, very excited. So I called this guy, and he connected me with some people. We found some little funding, and we are trying to look Daft Punk here. And we put together this funding and got some pilot money to see even if it works. Let's create some spiders and see if even those spiders, virtual spiders, will scare people. We don't know. It's an animation. So the way it worked, the original technology worked, was that the patient wears the goggle. The goggles connect to my computer via a modem router, and I see a 3D map of the patient's environment. I can choose a spider of any size, color, type, and put them in patient's environments. What you're about to see is a video demo of that technology. Basically, when the patient wears the goggles, I see a 3D map of the patient's surrounding. The yellow light is where the patient is looking at, and the black ring, if you can see it in the back, is where the patient is. So I have a dynamic understanding of where the patient is. Go choose a spider of any color, type, size I want, and oops, and I put it in my patient's environment. And this is a video actually BBC took. They brought their own patient and said, hey, treat this patient, we want to do this documentary. And these spiders are all at my command. I tell them where to go, what to do, how fast to go, how slow to move, what size to be. And at some point during the treatment, we would have the patient walk through the spider web, and that was the basically breaking point. Here the patient is saying, if you could hear it, she said, oh, it feels warm and fuzzy. It even creates that feeling of spider. And this is Tony Stark. This is our spider, and this is the treatment effect. So After that, we went to the realm of dogs. We're using basically running a clinical trial for fear of dogs right now. The dogs can sit, walk, jump, bark at our command. So I'm going to go through this phase of the data very fast because this is the less exciting part. The first question was, would these spiders scare people? They did scare them very much. We had some screaming and high anxieties in our patients, and we found that within the first few minutes of exposure to the virtual spiders, the fear response, both subjectively and via skin conductances, was not different than the fear response to a real tarantula. And this is the effects of the treatment initially. We basically had a clinical trial, intervention versus the control group. Control group didn't get any treatment. They came 1 week later, and they also came 1 month later to see how sustained the effects of the treatment are. This ended up being a 1-session treatment. Everybody was done in less than 1 session, and everybody was able to achieve the full treatment effect, which means they were able to get to the 0 distance from the spider, and everybody was able to touch the tank containing the spider or the real tarantula. Some people held the tarantula in their hand, and when they came back a month later, the effects were still there. An average treatment time 38 minutes, and these are some of our patients who were treated. And so that made us very excited. So we saw, okay, this is a treatment that is working. The therapist has a full control over the spider versus a tarantula being scared in the corner of the tank. And you can have all kinds of virtual stimuli here. And what we are doing with and then what happened was that we had a prototype laboratory kind of technology. And this was around 2020 when the pandemic was flaring up. Shantanu, this young man here, was my undergrad student intern. And he loved coding, and he was basically doing fMRI data analysis, and we had a study funded to cover his salary to do the fMRI work. And then the pandemic hit, and then we couldn't scan anybody. And one day I remember I went to Shantanu's office and I was like, Shantanu, you have all this time. How about you learn how to code? And this young man basically rewrote the whole code and expanded the software and made it so user-friendly that anybody can be trained in 12 minutes to run this app. And after that, he went to the big guy industry job and with his undergraduate degree. So it worked very well for both of us. And based on that, this is Kathleen, my research coordinator, social worker, clinician, who is running this clinical trial for fear of dogs. And that's Mishka, the big dog, my Great Pyrenees, who comes now instead of Tony Stark to see how the treatment is working. And we are seeing the same results. Here are a couple of examples that people who came with fear of dogs and intense anxieties and were able to, in around 1 hour treatment, go and hug my dog or touch my dog or walk my dog. So it did the same for the larger animals. That got us excited to go for the big leap. So we have a project funded by the state of Michigan with a focus on the needs of first responders. This is what we call Frontline Strong Together. And this project offers funding to do anything mental health related for first responders, ranging from peer support and training to cultural training of the providers to treatments for first responders, and also advanced basically development of treatment methods. And I thought now AR could be good for this reason. Why was that? We had a lot of patients who were on medications, had done PE, had done CPT, but still the avoidances were there. Like they didn't have much of nightmares and flashbacks, but they couldn't go to a grocery store. They couldn't go to a party. They couldn't go to a restaurant because specifically with these people, the traumas are human related. So humans are attached to fear. And the brain is in constant state of fight and flight. So if they are around others, they have to constantly check, make sure nobody's dangerous, nobody has a weapon. So I have detectives who were for a year in treatment, both on medication and psychotherapy, and they still were doing grocery shopping online. Not much of flashbacks, but the real world avoidances were still there because those are the things that are not addressed in traditional treatments. We tell them, okay, go do the exposure, but good luck with that. The avoidances don't let them. We sit and develop hierarchies. And through this, I also learned that in our training programs, one thing that is missing is learning how to do in vivo exposure. And I learned that because we were trying to convince our therapists, whether social workers or psychologists, to use this technology, and I felt resistance. I initially thought this is resistance to technology. But then I learned this is resistance to doing real in vivo exposure therapy because a lot did not even have the opportunity to learn how to do in vivo exposure. Most of exposures were imaginal or writing the hierarchies and then telling the patient to go to and do them in the real world. So we made some mistakes. We wasted a lot of money. We wasted a lot of time on the wrong people and the wrong things because nobody was doing this work. Even in the world of industry, nobody was doing augmented reality work. And I'm talking about 5 years ago. Until I met this guy, Luke, who has a company that worked with the kinds of Facebook and Marvel and Disney, and they knew how to trailblaze the programming. And we started working together with our team, and it was an amazing, full adventure of working with Fin Industry and the clinic to see how we can understand each other's language and how we can do the things that are plausible within the limitations of the technology. And we said we want to create an environment that patients, regardless of what diagnosis, can practice being comfortable around other humans. So now it can expand to PTSD, social anxiety disorder, autism spectrum, even practicing social skills. And we wanted this to be very easy to use. All the time anytime we were programming, I would say we want Audrey to be able to use this. And Audrey is a near retirement social worker who hates technology. So we spent a lot of times on the user experience to make it very easy to use. And the idea was that we want to have preset scenarios, which is basically you have, here. So we would have preset scenarios, which is basically you wear the goggles, you say, I want to go to a police station, a grocery store, and then it's like plugging you into the matrix. And then this real room would turn to a grocery store here, for example, and then digital humans slowly would come. So we designed the hierarchies. Let's say, what's the least intimidating character? A neutral looking petite woman in the far corner of the room. Then this other woman comes and joins her, and they're talking about something very neutral. Then this quiet guy comes and joins these two people. And gradually, bigger people, diverse Asian sex and race. Some people are like may have a bulge that may look like a weapon under their outfit, or some of them are arguing with each other. Some of them would sometimes stare at you. Gradually make it more intense and more people. And then we would have a scene generator. So let's say we have, because this is very expensive to program, we couldn't have everything. You're going to have Walmart and Meijer and this and that and that. So we had a grocery store, we had a restaurant, we had a house party, we had a sports arena, the common areas people avoid and leads to a lot of disability. Then we said we want all of these more than 100 characters we have to be usable by the therapists to create basically whatever scenario they want. So you have the props, you have the desks and the tables and the seats and the chairs and this and that, and the bar you can put in this room, and any character you want from this list of diverse more than 100 people, put in front of the patient and how many you want. And then you will type what they will say, and you will have a fluid conversation between you and the patient. So this is the next level. And then the final level was AI characters. We also want characters who are motivated by AI, and the patient can, at the next level, have an unpredictable conversation with another human as if they're having this conversation in the real world. And we were hoping these AI characters would also be able to role play based on the roles we give them. We recently published a paper, and it says "Unreal That Feels Real" is the title. And that is a quote from a patient that I will go back to later on. Just keep that in mind. I'll go back to that quote later. So this is a demo of the technology. So when the patient wears the goggles, they automatically wirelessly via Wi-Fi or my phone or anything, hotspot, they connect to the computer. So it's very mobile. You just need the headset and your laptop. And this is what I see. This is my panel. The green dot is where the patient's head is in the room. I can draw the line around them and say, this is the room. So you can fit to any room space that you want. And then a virtual wall opens on that room and the props are set and then the characters walk in. And I can see what the patient is seeing, where they are. And then as you see on the left bottom, I just hit next, 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 and more people come in and more people come in. And I know who all these people are. Here, for example, a tall Middle Eastern and a black female and a white male enter the room and stand in the right corner. And I can enter their anxiety levels, which is the SUD scores here, and it will be recorded for my use. We also use wristbands that measure the skin conductance and the heart rate. And then there's a repository of all the sound effects that I want in the right bottom that you see people arguing, car horn, backfire, first of fireworks, gunshots, anything that would be specific to the needs of that patient. And these are those older headsets that we are using. As you can see Alex's eyes, which means he can see you also. That's the power of the AR. We're here at the police station. And that's Rashid, a real human. And the sound is a stereo. So as you walk around with your own real feet, not a joystick, you get closer to one group, you hear them better. And you get closer to the other group and you hear those better. And then gradually, this is a police station because a lot of our cops with PTSD have associated that environment with fear, and they cannot even go to the police department for even for the medical evaluations, even if they are off work.
I had to pull the driver out. He was covered up unconscious, not in my mind.
Copy, shots fired at 78 Spring Street.
Now some critical incident happened.
Checking your status. Repeat, R2, checking your status.
It was a lot, yeah.
R2, can you confirm your location?
I felt bad.
Now the same characters, it's a fire station. We will recycle them because we use this for firefighters at the cops, and programming is very expensive. Now it's a grocery store.
How's his family doing with this? I don't really know.
And next is the and here is where I said you can put any character in front of you and I will type what they will say. So right now I will talk to these guys while my friend is typing in what they're saying.
Hi, I'm Officer Collins here with Officer Smith. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Are you guys coming off your shift?
Yes, it was a tough one.
I'm sorry to hear that it was tough. What did happen?
We had to do CPR on a 10-year-old child. It didn't go well.
So now the characters can do all the nonverbals that you want, throw the hands up, do smile, frown, look sad, all at your command. So basically the same thing we did with the spiders, now we did with the humans. Reactions were strong. I initially thought I would have to tell because there's something to be afraid of a virtual spider. There's another thing for a human. Humans should feel a lot more real. First of all, you saw the images you saw were look a little bit translucent and 2D. When you wear the goggles, it's 3D image. They feel so real that after so many years, I still never walk through these characters. I'll walk around them. And we had very strong reactions. Here's an example of one of the first people we treated with this technology. She was a Detroit police officer, PTSD due to an assault. Her functioning was extremely limited. She couldn't go anywhere. She was basically at home and would come to her medical visits, and that was it. And she was on medication. She had done psychotherapy before. In the first session, she was standing like this with her hands on her chest in one corner. She was eyeing everybody. Hands were sweaty. and heart rate was high, and we also measure skin conductance. Anytime we introduce new characters, skin conductance went up. And the next day she sent me this email. So she was our first patient treated. So this was very reassuring, both in the sense that we were able to create the fear responses, which we need to create for an effective therapy, and for the sake of the efficacy. She came back more sessions and she kept improving. And this is she was on a BBC documentary where she was interviewed, and she went to a graduation ceremony, sat there, got promoted to detective, and went back to work. So this got us very excited. And I have some other experiences, and we have been using this in the clinic now on a regular basis. The anxieties are so high that sometimes I have to remind people, not sometimes, often, that these characters are not real. I had one other detective, and these are like Detroit cops. They are not very shy people or shrinking violets. So she was standing in the corner of the room for 40 minutes, only allowing 2 women in that far corner. And I have to beg them to have their back to these characters even for a few seconds, because the fear response is there. And that's where the title of that article comes from, because one of these patients said, I know it is not real, but I cannot feel it is not real. So it feels so real. Same to me, same to other people, like non-patients who wear the goggles. It feels as if you're with these humans. And I think one reason is that you see these virtual humans in the real environment. So you look at the patient sees me as their therapist, and then sees these characters next to me, and they can walk around. They see their own hands, they see their own body, and that makes it feel very real. Interestingly, it is doing beyond exposure. A lot of cognitive patterns are coming up. For example, I have had patients who I had this patient in the beginning, after those 2 women who come to that corner in the house party, there is a tall guy who looks overweight, because we want to say someone who cannot run fast, standing next to those 2 women, and is standing quiet. My thinking was, when we were designing this, okay, he's quiet, he's not an aggressive person, he's not even saying anything, and those 2 women are feeling so comfortable next to him that they're talking to each other, even without talking to him. And for one of my, actually 2 of my cops, she was the worst. He was the worst character. Even later on, when there are like 12 people here, 2 big guys here arguing with each other in front of her, she was still hanging out the quiet guy. Why? We keep thinking, and then turns out the person who assaulted her was the quiet guy in the room who looked safe. How these different associations are made. So there's this other cop who saw one of the characters, and he's like, she looks like this cop, she said, this character looks like an angry church lady who is abusing her boyfriend. So she had decided the guy who walked in with her is also her boyfriend. Or this guy looks like an undercover agent that I hate. And at some point, when it's mostly the hardest part for them is to be at the police station. So we do that at later sessions. So I convinced this woman to let me just bring 1 cop. Not that she was hurt by cops. No, she was on the sex crime unit, which is a horrible unit to work on. But her brain had associated anything police related to pain. So she didn't want to be around cops. The first time one petite female police officer entered this room, she almost had a panic attack. She started having flashbacks. And she said to me, I know it is not real, but I feel you and this woman are about to attack me. Not that we enjoy scaring people, but this is an amazing opportunity to process these emotions. That's what we want in therapy. And then gradually this person was able to bring more people. At some point, she's like, she sees another younger woman, and she starts a cop, and she starts crying. Why are you crying? She said, I'm her future. I don't want her to go through what I went. It feels so real to these people that for some reason, I don't know, it also works like a Rorschach. All those things from inside come out. And we see all different reactions. But the cool thing still is that because it is not real, they sign up for doing it. A lot of times when you say, hey, go to the store. They're like, hell no, I'm not going to the store. And they bring all the excuses. But they know it is not real. They sign up for it. But then when they see it is working, it's all through the session, their logical brain knows this is not real. But the animal brain is scared. And that disconnect may be doing something here also. And I had another EMT. She had social anxiety disorder. We thought it was trauma, but then turned out to be social anxiety through this experience, because she was avoiding all these people. I was like, why are you avoiding them? I don't know. I'm not interested in people. I just don't like them. I was like, why? If you're not interested, you should be able to at least walk near them. Sounds like fear, what is happening here. Well, yeah, I'm afraid of them. Why are you afraid of? I don't know. What are you afraid of? I don't know. We keep thinking, and she gets closer to, oh, they're gonna judge me. Why are they gonna judge you? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, they're gonna judge my appearance. So step by step, it helped us. It's like in the Matrix, in the movie, if you have seen, the Neo is plugged into the Matrix when they're doing the training, and the lady in the red dress passing by. So here you have all these characters that you can see how your patient reacts to them. Now you have different races, you have different ages, different sexes, and these are when you take the screenshots through this headset, it looks like a faded like this, but in reality it's a lot more solid. So now this is a house party, gradual, different people of different backgrounds come in. This is the bar restaurant scene. The guy in the black suit is supposed to be my cameo. They were nice and put some hair on my head. We are working, that is AI created, so we are now working on making it more realistic. So any of these characters, we had to write exactly who they are. We basically were like a movie production scene. We want, let's say, this white guy. We want a taller white guy. He is in his late 30s. He is bald. He looks like this. He's wearing this. And then they wanted us to give him a reference photo and give them reference outfits, so exactly they would create the person we want. And we were thinking all through how we want to distribute our races and sexes and ages and behaviors and appearances with a clinical lens. What are the things that people avoid? What are the things that we want our patients to habituate to? I remember actually when it comes to the scene generator, I just remember this. 2 days ago, I had this patient in my clinic, and we were working on with her. I'm sorry, last week. We're working with her, and she couldn't go to her police medical. She was off work, but she couldn't even go for a medical evaluation. So we said, okay, how about we put two cops in front of you? How to have a small talk with a cop. So I was typing what the other cop was saying, and she was talking, and it's so interesting how she would react differently to these different cops of sex and age and race and behavior. We have kids now. Actually, the kid in the front is supposed to be my own cameo. And we have people with bruises because we work with first responders. We have dead people. We have people who draw their gun. And next, we went to the realm of AI. So we said we want to create these characters will be fully automated, not for them to be a therapist, but we want now for our patient to have a fluid conversation which has some level of unpredictability with a normal human, not an aggressive person. So Kathleen and I wrote the character Amy. Amy is a middle-aged elementary school teacher from Detroit. She's married, she has 2 kids. These are the things she loves. She comes from family of first responders, and she's nice. She's friendly. She's the first step. She's the kind of person you will not feel nervous talking to. And we can even define her moods and affect and how extroverted or introverted she is. And now you will see me having a fully automated conversation with Amy. So what you're about to see, I didn't know what she would say to me. We just knew the guardrails. She will not talk about politics, and she will not talk about religion, and she would not curse, and she will not tell me to kill myself. And we, at some point you will see, we will transition to role play with her. So I want you to see how intelligent these agents are in even knowing when you want to role play with them. You will see a lag between our talks. The reason is that we were using hotspot in that room where we were recording, which was in the medical school campus. So because my voice goes to the cloud, the response is, my voice is transcribed to text, goes to the cloud, is processed by the AI, Response comes, goes to another software that turns it to a voice that I can choose, which feels realistic, and then response comes to me. Hello.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
I'm not doing great. I'm a police officer, just came from a tough run.
Sorry to hear that. Sounds like you've been through a lot. Can you tell me more about what happened?
I prefer not to talk much about it. There was a terrible car crash. We had to pull some people out of the burning car.
Oh my goodness. That sounds incredibly difficult. It's understandable that you're feeling down. Do you have any way to relax and take your mind off things?
I want to go home now and just relax a little bit and be alone. But you know, with family, it's hard. My wife would want to talk to me, and I don't want to talk about this.
I can imagine. It's important to have some time to yourself to process what happened. Have you considered talking to a therapist or counselor? They could help you work through your feelings and give you some strategies to manage stress.
I don't trust them. I am more comfortable talking to my own peers.
I understand. Sometimes it can be helpful to talk to someone outside of your peer group, but I respect your decision. Can you tell me a little more about what you like to do in your free time?
Actually, I want to ask another question because cops don't have a lot of free time. Do you know about the life of a first responder?
Yes, I do. My father was a police officer and my uncle was a firefighter and paramedic. I have a lot of respect for the work that you and your colleagues do.
Now I'm going
It's
to
not
go
an
to the
easy job,
transition
and it's
part
important to
because
have
we
some-
have limited time. Let's see.
Of course, I understand. I'll do my
Change the topic of conversation. As a police officer, I want to practice de-escalation. Can you try to act like an angry civilian in a tough situation? I want to practice de-escalation.
Of course, I understand. I'll do my best to simulate an angry civilian in a tough situation. Please keep in mind that this is just a role play, and I'm here to help you practice de-escalation techniques.
Okay, let's go.
All right, I'll start. Listen, officer, I can't believe you're giving me a ticket for this. I was just trying to get to work, and now I'm going to be late because of you. This is ridiculous.
But ma'am, you were speeding. That can put your life and others in danger.
That's not the point. The point is that you're just doing this because you have a power trip. You think you're better than me just because you're a cop? Well, let me tell you something, buddy. You're not better than me. I pay your salary, and you're not doing your job if you're just going to harass people like me.
What would make you think that I'm not doing my job and I want to just give you our time?
Oh, so now you're trying to be condescending? That's even worse. You think you can just talk down to me and make me feel better? Newsflash, officer, it's not working. I want you to take responsibility for your actions. You're not some kind of god just because you have a badge.
Ma'am, I'm not trying to give you a hard time and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to do my job and you were speeding. That's the fact.
Fine. Whatever. Just give me the ticket and stop wasting my time. But you can bet I'm going to contest this. I'm not going to let you bully me.
You have all the rights to contest this. Actually, behind the ticket, there's instructions if you need to do that, how to do and what number you should reach for that purpose.
Oh, fine. Thanks for nothing.
Amy, thank you. This was amazing.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could help you practice de-escalation techniques. Remember, stay calm, empathize, and focus on finding a solution that works.
So, now we wrote Ross as a step up. Ross now is an older, tall, beaten up, cold former police officer, firefighter who is like still respectful but more distant. After Ross, we have created some snarky character who's like a little bit intrusive and makes too many jokes, so basically practice being more assertive. And right now, so as I said, and I see patients get so much engaged with AI. They just stand there for 10 minutes, they totally forget about me. They're talking about the trip they are planning to go to San Francisco and what are the good things to do there, and what's a good restaurant there, and different recipes. And so these different layers we have created, each of them are doing their own job. And for the next step, first of all, we got a funding from the Department of Defense to run a clinical trial there, basically combining this with prolonged exposure therapy with a focus in real world functioning for our veterans with PTSD. And we got feedback from a lot of therapists across the country who work with veterans and from veterans themselves. So we brought patients who had been treated with PE for their PTSD, and now they wear the goggles. Interestingly, the avoidances were still there. And they gave us feedback, so we will do some fine tuning of the software to their specific needs. Some people with military fatigue or outfit or behavior, and then run the clinical trial with them. And we go through different cycles of programming. Right now, we are in the middle of the next phase where we are moving the head technology to Apple Vision Pro, which is the newest form of these headsets. The advantage is you saw our images are a little bit see-through. That is because the HoloLens is a holographic image, but this is going to be very solid. Our characters, you saw Amy was just looking straight. The new characters will follow you with their necks. So they will look at you where you are. They will look at each other directly. And we have a chameleon here because we have a new character. Her name is Chameleon, and Chameleon, because she is a chameleon, will do whatever roles you want her to do. So we have asked her to be a drug dealer and try to sell me drugs, and she almost convinced me meth is good for my brain health, and they can do bullying, they can be a difficult boss doing a job interview, and their emotions also would be connected to the thought. So AI can also run the emotions of these characters. So that was my talk, and this is the book that Dr. Meyer mentioned earlier that I wrote a couple of years ago. This is basically a summary of everything I knew about fear, from evolution to politics and media, and it was a cool adventure to write this book. So that's where I can stop, and would love to hear what you think.
Wow, Dr. Javanbakht, that was just amazing. I have to say, you've blown me for sure away.
I appreciate feedback.
And I do have memories of you starting to write this book at the coffee shop in Ann Arbor. So it's good to see its completion.
Yes, yes.
So, any questions from the audience?
I'll ask a question. Thank you. Wonderful talk. Really cool. Interesting. I've tried AR as well, and with my two daughters, teenagers, and it was really fun. Apropos that, so much suffering in young, like we have a clinic and we wait till people actually show up, and you already showed that only 1/3 of people with specific phobias, social anxiety, PTSD ever get treatment, and they often don't even get good treatment. How about if we move it earlier and really try to help early teenagers learn skills preemptively through AR, especially once the price comes down, to gain these skills to be able to nip in the bud later onset, even though we know social anxiety really has a peak onset, age 9, 10, 11. It only gets worse. So I'm sure you've already thought about this.
So my hope is that this technology is not a PTSD treatment technology.
Right.
It's a tool that you have at your disposal to do whatever you think your patient needs. Example, we have a colleague from our Department of Psychology who's working with us. She has been working on dating experiences in teenagers, how would you navigate dating? If somebody approaches you, how would you say no? How would you say yes? How in the different situations they come with next to you and they wanna, I don't know, just kiss you, or they say, hey, let's go to my place. How to go through these difficult challenges. Or I have other colleagues who want to talk about how to train kids to be able to deal with a bully. So right now, the first colleague, what they do is that the patient wears a VR goggles that makes them feel they're sitting in a car, and then a research assistant comes here and whispers in their ear whatever that date person should supposedly be saying. Now they want to use this technology where the therapist is basically running the other character who could be of a specific race, age, sex that is needed for this specific person to do the training of the behavior or assertiveness with the bully. Or we have a colleague who's using this technology for, she's just submitted her grant to use it for helping refugee and migrant families be comfortable with the common environment. For example, Arab refugees that we work with here, they only go to the Arabic restaurant and only Arabic a grocery store and correspond with the Arabs. They are scared of the host community, not because they think they're going to hurt them, no, because they have no experience. So now this colleague of mine, she wants to bring a refugee mom and a child to wear these goggles and go to a grocery store, be around all these white and black and Asian people and navigate those kind of conversations. So in that sense, you can see this when, and a specific, as you said, hopefully at some point AR technologies would replace our phones when they are light like a head, like at the glasses, and now you have your computer and your TV and everything is AR. Then it can be used for even home practices, home trainings. You can even have, and with the AI, anything that has an algorithm can be automated. So that includes exposure therapy. So you can have an AI agent helping the person navigate those home practices through so they come to the clinic and they get their treatment or do their remote treatment with the clinic because it's a Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi connection. And then they do the home practices by themselves. So I think in that sense, it could be whatever your imagination desires.
Great.
And now that we are here, I offer any, if you guys have any thoughts about collaborations, this technology is within the university, it's not commercial yet. So I would be happy to share and think about ways of working together for any uses. Right now, I'm just using it for PTSD and sometimes social anxiety.
Mhm. So you're saying you can also automate the therapist, right? And have you started that work? And how does the AI therapist compare to the average?
Yeah, we haven't done that. I don't want to have an AI therapist per se. We want an AI technology to basically develop the hierarchies. Let's say, I mean, you can think as crazy as you want. We have the skin conductance and heart rate measures, and Apple headsets can measure the pupil diameter. So you can imagine I'm wearing the goggle, and based on how I'm reacting with these two characters which are already in this room, and my physiological response, or even what is your anxiety? I see, what is your anxiety level? 4 out of 10. Next character can comment. I see it more as a use at home, for kind of like when I have done my therapy in the clinic now at this stage. But the way you see now, AI has access to all the knowledge of the therapy. You could imagine and you could think of an imaginary, like a doctor, therapist showing up in this corner. Like one of these characters is your therapist and basically says, okay, now you go to the next level, because specifically exposure therapy. I mean, CBT would be harder. Psychodynamic therapy would be much harder. Other different types of therapy, which are more human contextual or difficult or thought related, are more difficult. But something which is just algorithm of hierarchies would be easier to automate, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, teenagers, they have a huge range of hierarchies of exposures that they need to go through to learn some skills before they hit 20, before they hit 18.
Especially post-COVID, because a lot of them didn't even learn how to be social.
There's so many who just do not know how to engage or relate. I mean, I keep thinking we need a course that's required on friendshipping, learning basic skills, and as well as like assertiveness and saying no and boundaries. Yeah.
You can do that with any AI agent. One other thing we are doing at this phase is that we will let you plant this AI brain in any of those more than 100 characters that we have here available. So it's not just Amy. So you can have your kid talk to that other kid, and kids love technology.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the counselors, they don't have enough time, obviously. But for example, right now with yeah. Anyway, I have many thoughts, but it really this is very great work.
Thank you.
Great work, and keep disseminating. Keep disseminating.
I would love to. And again, if any of you guys or your colleagues would be interested in collaboration, I would be happy to share this technology with them.
Yeah, and do you know the rate? I looked it up recently. For PhD clinical psychologists, psychology training programs, only 1/3 during their 5-6 years of training learn how to do exposure therapy. In psychiatry programs, what's the rate?
Much less, I would say, because we are mainly trained on knowing about therapies and doing psychopharmacology. But it's good you said that, because our psychology program, I've talked to them, they recently, within one of their educate training grants, put this so they can basically use this, because this is an amazing opportunity to learn in vivo exposure. So they want to use for training their PhD students to learn how to do in vivo exposure therapies.
And it works.
Mm-hmm.
But very few people are trained to do it.
Yes, yes. And I think one reason people are not trained to do it is that it's not feasible easily to do it. Like you have to take your trainees to the grocery store with the patient to do that. But now I bring grocery store to your clinic.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Javanbakht. It was just a wonderful delight. And yeah, I definitely want to bring you back for the next Coffee and Science seminar series to talk about your refugee work. I feel like, yeah, I also would love to hear that if that's possible.
With great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Good. The
Thank you.
next talk, the next presentation will be on April 8 by Dr. Martin Teicher from Harvard University. In a similar vein, speaking about the long-term effects of childhood maltreatment and implications for treatment.